Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Twists of Love and Fate. I'm so grateful you've joined me today. How are you doing? I genuinely hope you're taking care of yourself, finding moments of peace in this busy world. Whether you're having an amazing day or struggling through a difficult one, I want you to know that you matter, your feelings are valid, and sometimes the most unexpected moments can change everything. Today's story touched my heart deeply, and I believe it might just be exactly what some of you need to hear right now. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to say a prayer for everyone watching. May you find strength in your struggles, joy in your journey, and peace in your purpose. May today's story bring you hope and remind you that love finds us in the most unexpected ways. I'm always fascinated by how our stories connect people from across the globe. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. Are you nestled in a cozy apartment in New York City? Relaxing on a beach in Thailand? Or perhaps you're watching from a small town that most people have never heard of. I love seeing the diversity of our community, how our stories travel across oceans, mountains, and time zones to reach you. Knowing that someone in Tokyo might be watching at dawn while someone in London enjoys the same story at dusk makes this connection even more magical. Have you ever signed a contract only to discover that the fine print changed your entire life? Today's story explores how the coldest business arrangement transformed into the most passionate love story, proving that the heart follows no logic, no matter how carefully we plan. I first heard this story from a friend who works in corporate finance, and it stopped me in my tracks. It challenges everything we think we know about love, grief, and second chances. Imagine building walls around your heart for years, convinced that emotions are liabilities in your quest for success. Then suddenly, those walls crumble because of someone who was never supposed to matter. That's what happened to Ethan Blackwood, a man who had mastered every aspect of his life, except for love. What fascinates me most about this story is how we humans try to compartmentalize our emotions. We think we can separate business from pleasure, contracts from connections, and past from present. But life has a way of blurring those lines when we least expect it. This story also explores something many of us fear: being vulnerable with someone new after experiencing profound loss. Can we truly open our hearts again? Should we even try? And what happens when unexpected feelings develop in a relationship that was never meant to be real? The journey you're about to witness isn't just about falling in love. It's about the courage it takes to remove our masks and reveal our authentic selves. With all our scars and secrets, it's about finding strength in vulnerability and discovering that sometimes our greatest wounds lead us to our greatest healing. What would you do if you discovered that the person sharing your home, the one you married for all the wrong reasons, was hiding a heartbreaking secret? And what if that secret made you see them in an entirely new light? If today's story resonates with you, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover our channel and join our storytelling family. Subscribe if you haven't already to ensure you never miss our daily tales of love, fate, and life's unexpected turns. The notification bell is your friend. And most importantly, share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in this situation? Have you experienced something similar? Your insights often become the highlight of my day, and they help others feel less alone in their own experiences. This community thrives because of your engagement, so don't be shy. Let's talk. In the glittering world of corporate America, marriage contracts aren't uncommon. They're business arrangements designed to benefit both parties. Financial security exchanged for social status, companionship without emotional entanglement. Clean, efficient, and supposedly uncomplicated. That's exactly what Ethan Blackwood thought he was signing up for. As the CEO of a global empire worth billions, he viewed marriage as simply another strategic move on his corporate chessboard. The perfect wife would enhance his image, please his board of directors, and host flawless dinner parties for potential investors. Nothing more, nothing less. Enter Amara Johnson, brilliant, beautiful, and carrying a secret that would eventually crack the foundation of their carefully constructed arrangement. She agreed to the contract for her own reasons, never expecting that the cold-hearted businessman would discover what she had hidden so carefully. Their wedding photos showed the perfect couple. Him in an impeccable suit, her in a designer gown that cost more than most cars. They smiled for the cameras, shook hands with the elite, and returned to a mansion that felt more like a museum than a home. Two strangers bound by signatures on legal documents, playing roles they had agreed to perform. But what happens when pretending becomes too difficult? When late-night encounters in moonlit gardens reveal truths that were never meant to be shared? When a worn notebook and tear-stained pages tell a story of love and loss that changes everything? This is where our story truly begins. Not with the signing of contracts or exchange of rings, but with an unexpected moment of genuine connection between two people who thought they knew exactly what they were getting into, only to discover that the human heart follows no contract, no matter how carefully worded. Are you ready to witness how their perfectly planned arrangement unraveled into something neither of them ever expected? Ethan Blackwood wasn't born into wealth. He built his empire with calculated precision and relentless drive. At 38, he commanded Blackwood Enterprises from the top floor of a gleaming skyscraper that bore his name across the Manhattan skyline. The company had expanded from a modest tech startup to a global conglomerate with divisions in technology, real estate, and financial services across 3 continents. His morning routine never varied: 5 a.m. workout with his personal trainer, breakfast consisting of precisely measured protein and nutrients, and at his desk by 7 a.m. sharp. His employees both feared and respected him. A man who demanded excellence because he himself had never settled for less. His piercing blue eyes missed nothing, and his memory for details was legendary in business circles. The son of a factory worker and a school teacher from Ohio, Ethan had clawed his way through Ivy League education on scholarships and part-time jobs. That hunger never left him, even after his net worth crossed into billions. He wore success like armor: custom suits, rare watches, and a carefully cultivated public image of the ultimate self-made man. His office reflected his personality: minimalist, functional, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a godlike view of the city below. No family photos adorned his desk, only awards and recognition from business publications that had named him most innovative CEO 3 years running. Those who worked closely with Ethan knew his brilliance came with a price. He could dissect complex problems with remarkable clarity, but struggled to connect with people on a personal level. Relationships were equations to be solved, not experiences to be felt. His executive assistant had worked for him for 7 years and still received communications that ended with "Regards, E. Blackwood," never simply Ethan. In boardrooms across the globe, his name evoked respect and a touch of apprehension. Ethan Blackwood had everything money could buy, except for someone to share it with. Ethan viewed relationships through the same analytical lens he applied to business acquisitions, assessing risk versus reward. And in his calculation, romantic entanglements consistently presented unacceptable risk levels with minimal return on investment. His few attempts at relationships had ended predictably. Women were initially attracted to his power and wealth, but eventually grew frustrated with his emotional unavailability and workaholic tendencies. One former girlfriend had called him a calculator with a pulse during their final argument. He hadn't disagreed. At industry events, Ethan observed his married colleagues with clinical detachment. He noticed how their priorities shifted, how family obligations pulled them away from crucial business opportunities. He watched promising careers stall after executives began prioritizing school recitals over international meetings. To Ethan, these were cautionary tales, not aspirational stories. His own parents' marriage had been stable but uninspiring, a partnership of convenience and shared responsibility rather than passion. They had provided for him, supported his education, but never demonstrated what love could or should be. Their relationship had taught him that marriage was, at best, a practical arrangement, and at worst, a distraction from more important pursuits. Ethan's closest friend, if anyone could claim that title, was his CFO, James Chen, who had been divorced twice. Their conversations about James's failed marriages only reinforced Ethan's conviction that matrimony was a losing proposition. Marriage is just an expensive way to watch your assets divide in half, Ethan once remarked during a charity gala when questioned about his bachelor status. His penthouse apartment was designed for one person: his home gym, his office, his precisely organized closet. Nothing in his life had space for compromise or accommodation of another person's needs or desires. His schedule, his habits, his goals, all were calibrated for maximum efficiency and achievement. A wife would only complicate the elegant simplicity of his existence. The quarterly board meeting began like any other: financial reports, market projections, strategic initiatives. But when the agenda turned to company image and public relations, Ethan sensed a shift in the room's atmosphere. Margaret Chen, the 68-year-old veteran board member who had backed Ethan from the beginning, cleared her throat. "Ethan, while your leadership has been exemplary, we need to discuss your public persona." The board's concerns were presented with diplomatic precision. Blackwood Enterprises was expanding into more conservative markets. They were courting investors from traditional backgrounds. The company was pursuing government contracts that required extreme vetting of leadership. And throughout these discussions, one theme emerged consistently: Ethan's bachelor status was becoming problematic. "Family values matter to these clients," explained Robert Harrington, head of the international division. "They want to know the man behind the company is stable, committed, trustworthy." Ethan listened with growing irritation as board members presented examples of competitors whose CEOs leveraged their family images in marketing materials. Photos of executives with spouses at charity events, holiday cards featuring perfect families, interviews where CEOs credited their success to supportive partners. "We're not suggesting you change who you are," Margaret continued, though her tone implied exactly that. "But perception drives investment, and right now the perception is that you're," she paused, searching for the right word, "uncommitted." The data was undeniable. Market research showed that consumers and investors alike trusted married executives more than single ones. Studies indicated that married CEOs were perceived as more stable, more reliable, and less likely to take unnecessary risks. For the first time in his career, Ethan's personal choices were interfering with business objectives. The board wasn't issuing an ultimatum; they were too smart for that. But the message was clear: his bachelorhood was becoming a liability to the company he had built. As the meeting concluded, Margaret placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just think about it, Ethan. Sometimes personal sacrifices are necessary for professional advancement." Ethan approached the marriage problem with the same methodical precision he applied to corporate acquisitions. He created a spreadsheet with desired attributes, ranking them by importance: educational background, family connections, social skills, physical appearance, and compatibility with his lifestyle. He enlisted his most trusted assistant, Victoria, to discreetly compile profiles of potential candidates. "I need someone who understands this is primarily a business arrangement," he instructed. "No romantics, no one looking for a fairy tale." Victoria returned with 12 candidates. Ethan eliminated 7 immediately. Too young, too connected to competitors, too outspoken on social media. The remaining 5 warranted further investigation. He arranged accidental meetings at charity functions and industry events, observing each woman's social grace, conversational abilities, and how they handled pressure. 2 more were eliminated. One laughed too loudly, another asked too many personal questions. The final 3 candidates received background checks so thorough they would have impressed federal agencies. Ethan wanted no surprises, no hidden debts, no skeletons that might emerge later to embarrass the company. When Amara Johnson's name rose to the top of his list, Ethan studied her file with particular interest. MBA from Wharton, impeccable family background, experience in both corporate and nonprofit sectors. Poised, articulate, and notably private, her digital footprint was minimal and carefully curated. Their first meeting was arranged through a mutual business associate, casual enough to seem coincidental, structured enough to allow Ethan to assess her suitability. He arrived 15 minutes early to secure the optimal table at the restaurant, one that would allow him to observe her entrance and initial reactions. When she walked in, Ethan noted her punctuality, exactly on time, her appropriate attire, professional yet feminine, and the respectful way she addressed the staff. All positive indicators. What he hadn't anticipated was the unexpected acceleration of his heartbeat when she smiled, a physiological response he quickly dismissed as irrelevant to the task at hand. The Waldorf Astoria's exclusive restaurant hummed with quiet conversation and the subtle clink of fine china when Amara Johnson arrived. Ethan watched her scan the room with calm confidence before the maitre d' guided her to his table. She moved with natural grace, her posture perfect but not rigid, acknowledging other diners with subtle nods that suggested she recognized faces without needing to interrupt her path with unnecessary greetings. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, extending her hand as she reached the table. Her handshake was firm, professional rather than dainty, and her voice carried a warm timbre that contrasted with the cool efficiency of her movements. "Miss Johnson, thank you for making time in your schedule." Ethan gestured to the chair across from him, which the server promptly pulled out for her. "I was intrigued by the invitation," she replied, settling into her seat with practiced ease. "Though I suspect this isn't about the Johnson Foundation's educational initiatives." Ethan's eyebrow raised slightly. He hadn't mentioned the true purpose of their meeting to the mutual acquaintance who arranged it. "You're perceptive." "I do my research, Mr. Blackwood, just as I'm sure you've done yours." A small smile played at the corner of her lips as she accepted the menu from the server. Throughout the appetizer course, they discussed neutral topics, market trends, recent economic policies, mutual connections in their professional circles. Ethan noted how she listened actively, asking incisive questions that demonstrated genuine understanding rather than polite interest. When their main courses arrived, Amara set down her fork and looked directly at him. "Now that we've established we can maintain pleasant conversation, perhaps we should discuss why Blackwood Enterprises' CEO is really meeting with me. Your company isn't known for philanthropic interests in education, and I'm not currently seeking employment." Her directness caught him off guard, a rare occurrence in Ethan's carefully controlled world. For the first time in years, he found himself momentarily without a prepared response. Amara possessed the kind of beauty that revealed itself in layers rather than announcing itself loudly. Her complexion had a rich, warm undertone that seemed to glow from within, requiring no enhancement though she wore minimal, expertly applied makeup. Her eyes, deep brown with flecks of amber, reflected an intelligence that made Ethan conscious of being truly seen, perhaps for the first time in years. She wore her hair in intricate braids that framed her face in a crown-like formation, simultaneously professional and distinctly personal, a subtle statement that she honored her heritage while navigating corporate America. When she spoke, her hands moved with elegant precision, her nails manicured in a subtle nude shade that complemented her burgundy silk blouse. But it was her mind that truly commanded attention. She referenced obscure economic theories with the same ease that she discussed contemporary art. When Ethan mentioned a recent technology acquisition, she immediately identified potential regulatory hurdles he hadn't publicly disclosed. Her MBA from Wharton had clearly been earned, not merely attended. Most striking was how she balanced assertiveness with genuine curiosity. Unlike many who approached Ethan seeking to impress, Amara asked questions because she wanted answers, not to demonstrate her own knowledge. She listened with her entire being, present in a way that made everything else in the restaurant seem to fade into background noise. Their backgrounds formed a study in contrasts, yet with surprising parallels that emerged as their conversation deepened. Ethan had risen from middle-class Ohio, the son of practical parents who viewed education as the sole path to security. Amara came from Atlanta's black upper middle class, her father a successful cardiologist who had built his practice from nothing, her mother a former professor who left academia to lead a community foundation. "My parents expected excellence, not perfection," Amara explained when Ethan inquired about her upbringing. "They taught me that achievement without purpose is hollow." Ethan nodded, considering this philosophy so different from his own. "Mine taught me that security comes only from self-reliance. Depending on others was a weakness we couldn't afford." Where Ethan's education had been linear, scholarships, business school, immediate corporate climbing, Amara's path had meandered purposefully. After Wharton, she'd spent 2 years with a nonprofit in West Africa before returning to corporate America. She spoke 4 languages to his 2, and had lived in 6 countries to his 3. Their approaches to wealth diverged most significantly. Ethan's wealth was a scoreboard, tangible proof of his value and success. For Amara, money was a ability for impact, not a measure of worth. "The Johnson name means responsibility in my community," she said. "We're expected to lift as we climb." This concept was foreign to Ethan, whose charitable giving was calculated for maximum tax advantage and PR benefit. Yet beneath these differences lay common ground. Both had been exceptional students driven to prove themselves. Both understood the weight of expectations. Both navigated worlds where they had to carefully manage perceptions, he as a self-made man in old money circles, she as a black woman in predominantly white corporate spaces. Most importantly, both recognized the strategic value of partnership, even if they defined that term differently. This shared pragmatism, Ethan realized, might make their potential arrangement more viable than he had initially calculated. Their third meeting took place in Ethan's private office, 40 stories above Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views, but neither was distracted by the spectacle of the city below. On the glass conference table between them lay a document labeled Proposed Marital Agreement. "I appreciate your directness," Amara said, scanning the first page. "Most men would have disguised this proposition with romantic pretenses." "I respect your intelligence too much for that," Ethan replied. "This is a business arrangement that benefits us both. Clarity prevents future complications." The contract outlined their roles with corporate precision. Ethan would provide financial security, a generous monthly allowance, property in her name, investment accounts. Amara would fulfill the social obligations of Mrs. Blackwood, hosting events, attending functions, presenting the image of a supportive partner. "Section 4.2 is unacceptable," Amara noted, tapping a manicured finger on the page. "I won't agree to seek permission for my professional pursuits." Ethan considered this, amended to mutual consultation rather than permission. "Your career achievements enhance our collective image." They negotiated for hours, revising clauses about public appearances, family obligations, and financial entitlements. Neither raised their voice or showed frustration. This was business, not emotion. "And regarding children?" Amara asked, her expression carefully neutral. "Not required by the agreement," Ethan stated, "but open for discussion after 2 years, should both parties consent." When they reached the section on marriage dissolution, Amara's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman with 20 years of experience, suggested additional protections. Ethan's lawyer countered. Numbers were adjusted, terms refined. By evening, they had crafted a 40-page document that addressed every contingency from public displays of affection, minimal but convincing, to holiday obligations, alternating between families. As they signed the final draft, their hands briefly touched across the table. Neither acknowledged the momentary contact, nor the strange electricity it produced. "To a mutually beneficial partnership," Ethan said, extending his hand. "To clarity and shared objectives," Amara replied, sealing their arrangement with a handshake that felt oddly formal, given what they had just agreed to. The New York Times called it the wedding of the year. 600 guests gathered at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, transformed for the evening into a modern fairy tale setting with 20,000 white orchids and crystal installations that refracted light like suspended diamonds. Celebrities mingled with business titans and political figures, all drawn by the magnetic pull of power and exclusivity. Amara wore a custom gown that had required 4 months of hand-beating, a masterpiece of understated elegance that fashion magazines would feature for months afterward. Ethan stood tall in a bespoke tuxedo, his expression appropriately solemn yet pleased as she approached down the petal-strewn aisle. They exchanged vows they hadn't written, speaking words selected by the public relations team for maximum impact and media quotability. Their first kiss as husband and wife lasted precisely 3 seconds, long enough for photographers to capture the moment, brief enough to maintain dignity. At the reception, they moved through choreographed interactions, never separated for long, always presenting a united front. They danced their first dance to a classical piece chosen for its cultural significance, rather than any personal meaning. Ethan's hand rested properly at her waist, maintaining the precise distance their dance instructor had recommended, close enough to appear intimate, far enough to remain comfortable. "You look beautiful," he told her, "because it was expected." "Thank you," she replied with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They cut a 7-tier cake they barely tasted and toasted with champagne they merely sipped. When they departed amid sparklers and applause, they rode in silence to the private airfield where Ethan's jet waited to take them to their honeymoon. A 2-week tour of exclusive resorts selected for their networking opportunities with international business leaders. As the plane took off, Amara gazed out the window at the receding lights of New York, her reflection in the glass revealing, for just a moment, an expression of profound solitude despite the man sitting beside her. The Blackwood estate sprawled across 5 acres in Greenwich, Connecticut, a modern mansion of glass and stone designed by a renowned Japanese architect. Inside, minimalist luxury prevailed, museum-quality art, furniture selected for aesthetic perfection rather than comfort, and technology so seamlessly integrated it seemed to anticipate needs before they arose. Amara and Ethan occupied separate wings connected by a central living area. Their daily paths crossed with the precision of celestial bodies, predictable intersections followed by long periods of independent orbits. Breakfast at 7 a.m. in the sunroom, brief updates on their respective schedules, then divergence until dinner at 8 p.m. sharp when both were in residence. A staff of 12 maintained the property and their lives. A house manager, chef, groundskeepers, housekeepers, and Ethan's personal assistant, who often worked from the home office. The household ran with flawless efficiency, each person understanding their role in maintaining the perfect environment. The gardens provided the only hint of warmth in this meticulously controlled world, lush with flowering plants and hidden nooks where stone benches offered solitary refuge. It was here, among the carefully tended roses and sculpted hedges, that Amara spent most of her free time, a book in hand and her thoughts seemingly far from the beautiful prison she now called home. Amara performed her role with flawless precision, as if she'd studied for it her entire life. At Blackwood Enterprises events, she charmed board members with insightful questions about their families and interests, remembering details from previous conversations that made each person feel uniquely valued. She stood by Ethan's side at industry galas, her hand resting lightly on his arm, laughing at the right moments and steering conversations away from potentially controversial topics with such subtle grace that no one noticed the redirection. Her wardrobe evolved to complement Ethan's public image. Sophisticated designs in a palette of jewel tones and neutrals that photographed well and projected appropriate wealth without ostentation. She became known for her tasteful jewelry, always elegant but never flashy, each piece selected to convey status while maintaining understated refinement. The dinner parties she hosted at the Blackwood estate became coveted invitations among the elite. The menus featured innovative cuisine that impressed without intimidating, wines perfectly paired but never ostentatious. Amara orchestrated seating arrangements that facilitated beneficial connections for Ethan's business interests while ensuring everyone felt comfortably placed. She maintained appropriate charitable involvement, joining the boards of 3 prestigious organizations, where her presence enhanced the Blackwood name. Her contributions at meetings were thoughtful and measured, demonstrating intelligence without overshadowing her husband's prominence. In public, she touched Ethan with calculated affection, a hand on his shoulder, a brief clasp of fingers, the occasional kiss on the cheek. She referred to him as my husband with just the right inflection of pride and warmth. What no one witnessed were the moments after the doors closed, when her smile faded and her shoulders relaxed from their perfect posture. How she removed her jewelry with mechanical efficiency, placing each piece in its designated spot. How she sat at her vanity, methodically removing the mask of makeup before applying her actual skincare routine. How she never once slipped and called him my love when they were alone. 3 months into their marriage, Ethan found himself watching Amara with increasing frequency. Something about her performance, flawless as it was, had begun to intrigue him. He noticed how her smile appeared precisely when required, yet vanished the instant it was no longer necessary, like a light switched off when leaving a room. During a benefit gala, he observed her from across the ballroom as she conversed with the wife of a potential investor. Her animation, her engaged expression, her perfectly timed laughter, all disappeared the moment she turned away, replaced by a brief flash of something he couldn't quite identify. Exhaustion? Sadness? Whatever it was, it vanished so quickly he almost doubted he'd seen it. At breakfast, he began asking questions beyond their usual schedule coordination. Did you enjoy the book you were reading yesterday? Or, what did you think of the new exhibit at the gallery? Her answers were always appropriate, but revealed nothing of substance, as if she'd prepared responses to maintain the exact right distance. Most curious was her habit of disappearing into the gardens late at night. Twice, returning from late meetings, he'd spotted her sitting alone on a bench, her face turned toward the moon, completely still and utterly unaware of his presence. Something about her solitude in those moments stirred an unfamiliar sensation in him, a desire to understand what thoughts occupied her mind when no one was watching. The first tangible sign appeared when Ethan noticed a recurring calendar notification on Amara's tablet. March 17th, marked simply with a small star. When he casually mentioned the date during dinner, asking if she had special plans, her hand paused momentarily before continuing to lift her wine glass. Just a personal reminder, she said, changing the subject with practiced ease. Then, there was the locked drawer in her desk, unusual in a house where they had explicitly agreed to transparency. When his cufflink rolled beneath her writing table and he mentioned needing to retrieve it, she moved with uncharacteristic quickness to handle the task herself. Most telling was the worn notebook he glimpsed once when entering her room unannounced. She closed it immediately, sliding it beneath a stack of magazines with a casualness that seemed rehearsed. For a woman who preferred digital organization for everything, the handwritten volume stood out as anomalous. Her phone calls sometimes ended abruptly when he entered a room. Not suspicious conversations, but rather a sudden shift in tone, as if she wore different personas depending on her audience. And there were the nights when he passed her bedroom door and heard what sounded like muffled crying, only to find her perfectly composed at breakfast the next morning, discussing charity events and social engagements, as if nothing were amiss. I need to pause our story here for a moment, because I'm genuinely curious about your thoughts. Have you ever been in a relationship where you sensed the other person was hiding something important? That feeling when you know there's more beneath the surface, but you can't quite grasp what it is. What would you do if you were Ethan? Would you confront Amara directly about her strange behavior? Or would you investigate privately first? Or perhaps you'd respect her privacy and wait for her to open up on her own terms. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspectives often give me new insights into these complex human situations. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button to let me know. It helps more people discover our channel and join our storytelling community. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Click that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss our daily stories of love, fate, and life's unexpected turns. Now, let's get back to Ethan and Amara's story, because what happens next will change everything between them. The night that changed everything began with a thunderstorm. Rain lashed against the windows of Ethan's home office as he reviewed quarterly projections. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic drumming of water against glass and the occasional rumble of thunder. Just past midnight, a flash of lightning illuminated the gardens, and in that brief, electric moment, Ethan glimpsed a figure moving among the roses. Amara. She wore no coat despite the downpour, her white nightgown becoming translucent in the rain as she walked with deliberate steps toward the small stone gazebo at the garden's center. Her hair, free from its usual perfect styling, hung in wet coils down her back. Ethan set down his tablet, drawn to the window by the strangeness of the scene. Something about her movements suggested urgency, a purpose that couldn't wait until morning, or even until the storm passed. He watched as she reached the gazebo and sank onto the bench, pulling something from the pocket of her nightgown. Even from this distance, the moonlight revealed it was the worn notebook he'd glimpsed before. She opened it with a reverence that struck him as almost religious, like a devotee consulting sacred text. For reasons he couldn't articulate, Ethan knew he was witnessing something profoundly private, something that might explain the mystery that was his wife. Without conscious decision, Ethan found himself moving through the darkened house toward the garden door. He grabbed an umbrella from the stand, but left it unopened as he stepped into the rain. Some instinct told him that announcing his approach would cause Amara to hide whatever truth he was about to discover. The wet grass muffled his footsteps as he moved between sculpted hedges and flowering shrubs. Lightning flashed again, briefly illuminating the path ahead before plunging the garden back into darkness. The rain soaked through his shirt, plastering it against his skin, but he barely noticed. As he neared the gazebo, he heard it, a sound so unexpected it stopped him in his tracks. Amara was crying. Not the delicate, composed tears one might shed at a moving film, but deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed wrenched from somewhere primal and raw. He stood frozen, rain streaming down his face, watching his perfectly controlled wife break apart. Her fingers traced something in the notebook, a photograph, he realized, while her other hand pressed against her mouth as if trying to physically contain her grief. In that moment, Ethan saw Amara, truly saw her, for the first time. Not the carefully crafted persona who moved through their shared life with practiced grace, but a woman in genuine pain, believing herself completely alone with her sorrow. Amara. Her name left his lips softly, almost lost in the sound of rainfall. She startled violently, snapping the notebook shut and wiping her face with quick, desperate movements. Ethan, I didn't. I was just... For once, her perfect composure failed her completely. You're soaked through, he said, stepping into the gazebo. You'll catch cold. She laughed, a hollow sound with no humor. That would be inconvenient for the Blackwood image, wouldn't it? The bitterness in her voice surprised him. He sat beside her, leaving careful space between them. What's wrong? Nothing that concerns our arrangement. She attempted to slide the notebook into her pocket, but her wet nightgown clung to her body, making the movement awkward. I think we're beyond that right now, don't you? He gestured to her tears, the storm, the late hour. Silence stretched between them, punctuated by thunder. Finally, she sighed and opened the notebook again, revealing a photograph of herself with a man Ethan had never seen. Both laughing, her head thrown back in genuine joy, his arms wrapped around her waist. His name was Marcus, she said, her voice barely audible. Today would have been our wedding anniversary. The words hung in the damp air between them. We were engaged for 2 years. He was a pediatric surgeon, brilliant, compassionate. Her fingers traced the man's face with such tenderness that Ethan felt like an intruder. 3 years ago, he was driving home from a 30-hour shift, fell asleep at the wheel, died instantly. She turned the page, revealing more photos. Marcus in scrubs, Marcus and Amara hiking, Marcus kneeling with a ring box. I thought I was healing, moving forward. Then your proposal came and it seemed practical. A new life, new purpose. She closed the book gently. But some days, like today, I realize I've just been pretending, playing a role while my heart is still. She trailed off, unable to finish. Still with him, Ethan completed softly. She nodded, fresh tears mingling with raindrops on her cheeks. I violated our agreement, Amara said, her voice steadying as she retreated behind professionalism. Section 12.3 clearly states that both parties enter this marriage free of emotional entanglements that might compromise the arrangement. Ethan was struck by how she could cite their contract verbatim, even in this moment of raw emotion. I should have disclosed this, she continued. It was dishonest not to. Why didn't you? He asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Amara looked down at her hands, still clutching the notebook. Your requirements were specific. You wanted someone unencumbered by emotional baggage, someone who could focus entirely on the role. She took a shaky breath. And I needed this marriage to work. My father's medical practice had been sued for malpractice, wrongfully, but the legal fees were devastating. My mother's foundation was at risk. Your financial support has helped them recover without anyone knowing how close they came to losing everything. She finally met his eyes. I thought I could compartmentalize, keep Marcus in a separate part of my heart while fulfilling my obligations to you. Most days I can, but today... She gestured helplessly at the date in the notebook. Are you going to invoke the dissolution clause? She asked, vulnerability bleeding through her composed facade. You have grounds. I misrepresented myself. The fear in her question was palpable. Not fear of losing luxury or status, but of failing her family, of breaking her word, of being judged for the grief she couldn't control. I understand if you want to end this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But please, the settlement terms, my parents still need. She stopped abruptly, seeming to realize she was negotiating from a position of weakness. Drawing herself up, she attempted dignity, despite her soaked nightgown and tear-stained face. I apologize for the deception, Ethan. Whatever you decide, I'll accept the consequences. Ethan was silent for a long moment, rain drumming on the gazebo roof as he processed everything. When he finally spoke, his voice held none of the cold calculation Amara had expected. My mother died when I was 14, he said quietly. For years afterward, my father would sit in her garden every Sunday morning. He never remarried, never even dated. I used to think he was weak for not moving on. He looked at Amara, really looked at her. I was wrong. Love like that, it doesn't just disappear because someone is gone. Reaching out slowly, telegraphing his movement to give her time to pull away, Ethan gently took the notebook from her hands and closed it with care. Our contract doesn't account for grief because I didn't understand it when I wrote those terms. I do now. He handed the notebook back to her. There will be no dissolution, Amara. Your secret is safe, and your family will remain protected. Standing, he removed his soaked shirt and draped it around her shoulders. An unexpectedly tender gesture from a man who rarely touched her outside of public appearances. Come inside, he said softly. I'll make tea, and if you want to tell me about Marcus, I'd like to listen. The night in the gazebo marked a subtle but profound shift in the Blackwood household. Breakfast remained at 7 a.m., but now included actual conversation rather than schedule coordination. Ethan began asking Amara's opinion on business matters. Discovering her insight often revealed angles he hadn't considered. She, in turn, started sharing small truths about herself. Her preference for jazz over classical music, her secret love of spicy food despite the chef's bland menus, her childhood dream of becoming a novelist. Their public performance remained flawless, but behind closed doors, the rigid choreography of their arrangement softened into something more natural. Ethan no longer retreated to his office immediately after dinner, instead joining Amara in the library where they read in companionable silence. Sometimes he would look up from his reports to find her watching him with a curious expression, as if seeing him for the first time. The staff noticed the changes, how Mr. Blackwood now walked beside his wife in the gardens rather than ahead of her. How Mrs. Blackwood sometimes brought coffee to his office without being asked. How their voices could occasionally be heard laughing together behind closed doors. One evening, returning from a charity gala, Amara stumbled slightly on the stairs. Ethan's hand caught her elbow, steadying her with instinctive care. Neither acknowledged the touch, but neither pulled away immediately either. His hand lingered a moment longer than necessary. Her smile held a warmth that hadn't been there before. They remained in separate bedrooms. Their marriage still unconsummated as per their agreement, yet invisible walls were crumbling between them, replaced by something neither had anticipated: genuine respect, growing fondness, and the tentative foundation of trust. Thank you, Amara said one evening as they sat in the library. For what? Ethan asked, looking up from his book. For not making me pretend anymore, she replied simply. It's exhausting to be perfect all the time. Ethan discovered Amara's writing by accident. Late one night, searching for a misplaced contract in the shared study, he found pages of handwritten prose tucked between budget reports. Unlike her notebook about Marcus, these pages contained fiction, vivid stories of complex women navigating impossible choices. He read a few paragraphs, captivated by the raw emotion and elegant language, before realizing he was intruding on something private. The next day, a leather-bound journal appeared on her desk, expensive, with creamy paper and her initials embossed in gold. I thought you might prefer this to loose pages, Ethan said casually when she questioned the gift. Amara's fingers traced the leather. You found my stories. Accidentally, he admitted. You're talented, Amara, remarkably so. She shook her head. It's just a hobby. It could be more. He placed a brochure beside the journal, a prestigious writing workshop in New York. I've arranged for you to have Thursdays free. The workshop runs for 8 weeks. But the foundation board meets on Thursdays, she protested. Our agreement was for you to support my business interests, he interrupted gently. It never specified that you couldn't pursue your own. Her eyes widened with surprise, then filled with something he hadn't seen before, genuine happiness directed at him. Thank you, she whispered, clutching the journal to her chest. Their conversations began in the library after dinner, then gradually migrated to the garden as summer evenings lengthened. Seated on the same bench where Amara had revealed her secret, they discovered the strange intimacy that comes from talking in darkness. What did you want to be before business consumed your life? Amara asked one night, stars reflecting in her eyes. Ethan considered the question. An architect. I used to sketch buildings as a child, structures that seemed impossible but beautiful. Why didn't you pursue it? Security seemed more important than passion. He paused. My father always said dreams don't pay bills. These nocturnal exchanges peeled away layers neither had shown anyone else. Ethan confessed his fear that success had cost him his humanity. Amara admitted she sometimes woke panicking that she'd forgotten Marcus's voice. They discussed books, debated politics, and shared childhood memories. Her family trips to Ghana to connect with her heritage, his summers working construction to earn college money. One night, a meteor shower kept them in the garden until dawn. Lying on a blanket pointing out shooting stars, they found themselves holding hands without conscious decision. Neither mentioned it the next day, but something had shifted. A boundary crossed without acknowledgement. Their marriage contract remained in force, but these midnight conversations were creating an unwritten agreement of their own, one based on genuine connection rather than obligation. Ethan couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened. When Amara transformed from a strategic partnership into the person he looked forward to seeing most each day. Perhaps it was watching her return from her writing workshop, face animated as she described a breakthrough in her story. Or maybe during the board dinner when she deftly redirected a conversation that would have embarrassed a key investor, her intelligence serving not just his interests, but demonstrating genuine care for others. It might have been the morning he found her in the kitchen at 5 a.m., attempting to make pancakes for his birthday, a disaster of flour and eggshells that had them both laughing until they couldn't breathe. The perfect Mrs. Blackwood, covered in batter, had never looked more beautiful to him. What he knew with certainty was that his carefully ordered world now revolved around moments with her, the way she absent-mindedly twisted her hair when concentrating, how she always remembered details about his employees' families, her habit of leaving notes in books she thought he should read. He found himself making decisions based on what might make her smile. Meetings were rescheduled to attend her first public reading. Business trips shortened to minimize nights away from home. The cold, minimalist mansion gradually warming with touches that reflected her taste. Colorful throw pillows, art from emerging black artists she admired, bookshelves overflowing with poetry and fiction. The realization struck him during a charity gala as he watched her across the room. She was engaged in conversation with an elderly donor, her attention completely focused on the woman's story, genuine interest radiating from her expression. In that moment, Ethan recognized the unfamiliar sensation that had been growing within him for months. He, Ethan Blackwood, who had built an empire on calculated decisions and emotional detachment, had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with his wife. The knowledge terrified him. Their contract specified mutual respect and partnership, not love. Especially not when her heart still belonged, at least partially, to a ghost. Amara stood before the bathroom mirror, her reflection revealing the conflict within. Tonight marked 3 years since she'd revealed Marcus's existence to Ethan. 3 years of an evolving relationship neither of them had anticipated. She touched the delicate necklace at her throat, a gift from Ethan to celebrate her first published short story, and felt the familiar wave of guilt wash over her. Marcus's memory remained, a cherished part of her past she would never relinquish. His photograph still sat on her bedside table, though now accompanied by other mementos, theater tickets from shows with Ethan, A seashell from their weekend at the Hamptons, the first edition book Ethan had tracked down after she mentioned loving it as a child. "Am I betraying you?" she whispered to Marcus's memory, a conversation she'd had countless times in her mind. By feeling this way about him? The truth she struggled to accept was that her heart had expanded rather than replaced. Her love for Marcus remained intact, a beautiful chapter completed too soon. But alongside it, something new had grown. Complex feelings for the man who had shown her unexpected compassion, who encouraged her dreams, who had gradually revealed himself to be so much more than the cold businessman she'd contracted to marry. She thought of Ethan's face that morning when she'd mentioned potentially accompanying him on his upcoming business trip to London. How his eyes had lit up before he carefully composed his expression into casual agreement. She recognized the look he tried to hide when he thought she wasn't watching. The same look she caught in her own reflection when thinking about him. "It's different," she told herself. Not lesser, not a replacement, just different. The most frightening realization was that she wanted more, wanted to cross the final boundary between them, to transform their marriage of convenience into something real and complete. But doing so felt like a final farewell to Marcus, an admission that life had truly moved forward without him. "How do I honor your memory while embracing this new chance?" she asked the empty room, tears sliding down her cheeks. "How do I love them both without betraying either?" March 17th arrived again. What would have been Amara and Marcus's 5th wedding anniversary. Unlike previous years, she didn't retreat to the garden alone. Instead, she sat on their bedroom floor, surrounded by mementos. Marcus's medical school graduation photo, the engagement ring she kept in a velvet box, ticket stubs from their first date. Ethan found her there, cross-legged among the fragments of her previous life. "I should join the foundation dinner tonight," she said without looking up. "The Hendersons are expecting us both." "I've already sent our regrets," Ethan replied softly, remaining in the doorway to respect her space. Amara traced Marcus's smile in the photograph. "I dreamed about him last night. He was disappointed in me." "For what?" "For wanting to be happy again. For thinking about a future that doesn't include grieving him every day." Her voice broke. "For falling in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them. The first time either had spoken the word love about their relationship. "Some days I feel like I'm betraying him by moving forward. Other days I feel like I'm betraying you by holding back." She finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to reconcile loving you both without feeling like I'm being unfaithful to someone." That evening, they walked to the gazebo where their relationship had first begun to transform. Spring flowers were just beginning to bloom, their fragrance filling the cool night air. Amara hugged herself against the chill, declining Ethan's offered jacket with a small shake of her head. "I need to feel this," she explained. "Sometimes numbness is too comfortable." They sat on the bench, a careful distance between them. "I'm afraid," Amara finally said, her voice barely audible above the gentle fountain nearby. "I'm afraid that if I fully embrace what I feel for you, I'll lose the last pieces of Marcus. That memories will fade, that one day I might forget the exact sound of his laugh or the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled." She turned to face Ethan, vulnerability etched across her features. "And I'm afraid that I'll never be able to give you what you deserve. A wife who loves you completely, without shadows from the past." Her hands trembled as she continued. "Most of all, I'm afraid that I'm being selfish, wanting to keep Marcus's memory alive while also wanting a future with you. Is it even possible to honor both? Or am I just being greedy, trying to hold on to everything?" The question wasn't rhetorical. She searched his face, desperately seeking an answer that would quiet the conflict raging within her heart. Ethan considered her question carefully, understanding its weight. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but certain. "The human heart isn't designed with limited capacity, Amara. It's not a zero-sum equation where loving one person diminishes what you feel for another." He turned slightly to face her. "Think about parents with multiple children. They don't divide their love into smaller portions with each new child. They simply create more love. Each relationship is unique, incomparable." The moonlight illuminated his face as he continued. Your love for Marcus isn't diminished by what you feel for me, and what you feel for me isn't lessened by the love you still carry for him." He reached for her hand, his touch tentative. "Marcus will always be part of you. The woman I've fallen in love with was partly shaped by her relationship with him. To ask you to forget him would be asking you to be someone else entirely." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Love isn't about replacement, Amara. It's about growth. Your heart has room for both of us. The man who helped shape your past, and, if you'll allow it, the man who wants to share your future." He smiled softly. "It's not greedy to honor both. In fact, I think it's the most human thing possible." Amara's tears fell freely now, but they were different from the anguished sobs of previous anniversaries. Something was shifting within her. A knot of guilt and grief beginning to loosen after years of constriction. "I never thought of it that way," she whispered. "That loving you doesn't betray him." She reached into her pocket and withdrew Marcus's engagement ring, the symbol she'd kept hidden for years, the physical manifestation of her inability to move forward. "I've carried this everywhere since his death. Never wore it, but couldn't bear to be without it." Her fingers closed around the diamond. "It's been my anchor to the past." Ethan watched silently as she stood and walked to the edge of the gazebo. For a moment, she held the ring up to the moonlight, letting it catch the brilliance one last time. "I don't need this to remember you," she said softly, as if speaking directly to Marcus. "You're in my heart, not in this ring." With a deep breath, she opened a small compartment in the gazebo wall, a hidden nook she'd discovered during her many solitary visits, and gently placed the ring inside. "Not thrown away," she explained, turning back to Ethan with tears streaming down her face. "Just put in its proper place. In my past, not between us." As they walked back toward the house, their fingers intertwined for the first time without pretense or performance. The simple touch contained a promise neither needed to verbalize. "I've been afraid too," Ethan admitted, breaking the comfortable silence. "Afraid that I could never compete with a perfect memory, that I would always be your second choice." Amara stopped, turning to face him fully. "Marcus wasn't perfect. We argued about his long hours. He was terrible with money." He snored. A small, genuine laugh escaped her. "And you're not a replacement or a second choice. You're a different chapter in my life, one I never expected but now can't imagine being without." Something profound was happening between them. Walls crumbling, truth emerging without calculation or strategy. The business arrangement that had brought them together seemed distant now, replaced by something authentic and unplanned. "I think we both need to heal," she said softly. "You from believing success means isolation. Me from believing loyalty means eternal grief." Ethan nodded, reaching up to brush a tear from her cheek. "Perhaps we can heal together." As they reached the house, neither moved toward their separate wings. Instead, Amara led Ethan to the library where their journey had truly begun, ready to start writing a new chapter together, one that honored the past while embracing the future. The following year transformed their lives as they rediscovered the world through each other's eyes. Their first real vacation, not a business trip disguised as leisure, took them to Ghana, where Amara connected Ethan to her ancestral roots. They wandered through vibrant markets in Accra, her hand guiding him through unfamiliar foods and customs. He watched in amazement as she conversed fluently with locals, seeing a confidence in her he'd never witnessed in corporate settings. In Kyoto, Ethan showed Amara the architectural wonders that had inspired his childhood dreams. They stayed in a traditional ryokan where he sketched building designs for the first time in decades, her encouraging presence beside him as forgotten passions reawakened. They hiked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, both pushing beyond physical comfort zones, reaching the summit breathless and exhilarated as dawn broke over ancient stones. The photograph taken there, hair wind-blown, faces flushed with effort, genuine smiles, replaced the posed professional portrait in their living room. Their travels weren't always exotic. Weekends exploring small New England towns, discovering hidden bookshops and local cafes, often proved just as meaningful. In these shared experiences, they built a collection of private jokes, favorite places, and memories that belonged solely to them. Not to business obligations or public personas, but to Ethan and Amara as they truly were. Amara's first novel emerged from the leather journal Ethan had given her, its pages filled with a story that blended fiction with elements of her own journey through grief and unexpected love. When she nervously shared the completed manuscript, Ethan read it overnight, appearing at breakfast with red-rimmed eyes and profound respect. "This needs to be published," he said simply. Though he offered connections to major publishing houses, Amara chose a smaller, independent press known for championing diverse voices. Ethan supported her decision without question, understanding her need to succeed on her own merits. The book's launch event transformed the Blackwood Estate's formal ballroom into a vibrant literary salon. Ethan stood in the background, watching with quiet pride as Amara read passages that moved the audience to tears and laughter. When asked about her inspiration during the Q&A, she glanced at him with a private smile before answering. Reviews praised the novel's emotional depth and authentic portrayal of love's complexity. Literary awards followed, along with a teaching position at a prestigious writing program that Amara accepted with Ethan's enthusiastic encouragement. Her writing space in their home expanded from a desk in the corner to an entire sunlit room filled with books and inspiration. There, she crafted stories that touched readers worldwide, while Ethan ensured she had everything she needed. Sometimes just tea and silence, other times his listening ear as she worked through creative challenges. The transformation within them proved more profound than any external success. Ethan, once defined solely by business achievements, discovered the quiet satisfaction of supporting someone else's dreams. Board meetings and acquisition deals, while still important, no longer consumed his identity. He learned to measure wealth in moments rather than millions. Amara's laughter during their morning walks, the peaceful silence of reading together by the fire, the simple pleasure of planning their next adventure. His employees noticed the change first, how he now asked about their families, implemented flexible work policies, and occasionally left the office early for no reason other than wanting to be home. The man who once viewed emotions as liabilities now understood they were his greatest assets. Amara's evolution was equally significant. The woman who had carefully hidden her grief now wrote openly about loss and healing, helping others navigate their own pain. She stopped performing perfection, embracing instead the messy authenticity of being fully herself. Her public speaking no longer featured memorized appropriate responses, but genuine perspectives, even when they challenged conventional wisdom. Most importantly, she learned to love without guilt, to honor Marcus's memory while fully embracing her life with Ethan. The anniversary of Marcus's death remained important, but it became a day of gratitude for having known him, rather than a day of paralyzing grief. Together, they discovered that true transformation doesn't erase the past. It integrates it into a more complete present. On their third anniversary, Ethan surprised Amara with the original marriage contract, now framed behind glass. "I thought we could hang it in the library," he suggested, as a reminder of where we started. Amara traced the signatures on the glass. "It feels like it was signed by different people." "It was," Ethan agreed. That evening, they drafted a new document. Not a legal contract, but a letter to each other, articulating promises no lawyer had suggested. Ethan pledged to prioritize their relationship above business demands. Amara committed to sharing her struggles rather than presenting a perfect facade. Both promised honesty, even when uncomfortable, and the courage to grow together rather than apart. Their daily rhythms evolved naturally. Breakfast remained at 7 a.m., but now featured genuine conversation rather than schedule coordination. They still attended business functions, but arrived and departed together rather than meeting at venues. Their home transformed from a showcase into a sanctuary, filled with objects chosen for meaning rather than appearance. Most significantly, decisions became truly collaborative. When Ethan considered expanding to international markets, Amara's insights influenced which countries to prioritize. When she received an opportunity for a writing residency abroad, they rearranged their lives to make it possible. The calculated arrangement that had joined them evolved into something neither had anticipated, but both now treasured. A genuine partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and deep love. On a quiet evening 5 years into their marriage, Amara found Ethan in the garden gazebo, the place where their true relationship had begun. He sat with an architectural sketch pad, designing what appeared to be a children's hospital. "What's this?" she asked, settling beside him. "A project I've been considering," he replied. "The Marcus Williams Memorial Children's Center. If you approve, of course." Tears filled her eyes as she examined the beautiful design. "You would do that? Name it after him? He was part of your journey, which makes him part of ours." Ethan took her hand. "Besides, the world lost a gifted pediatric surgeon. This seems a fitting way to continue his legacy." In that moment, Amara understood the true miracle of their story. Not just that she had found love again, but that it was with someone who honored rather than erased her past. Their beginning had been calculated, a business transaction between two people seeking advantage. Yet somehow, through vulnerability, compassion, and courage, they had discovered something precious and rare. Second chances didn't come from forgetting or replacing what was lost. They came from making space for new possibilities alongside cherished memories, from recognizing that the heart's capacity for love is limitless when we have the courage to open it fully. As the sun set over their garden, Amara rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, grateful for the unexpected journey that had brought them here. To a love neither had sought, but both now considered their greatest fortune. As we close Ethan and Amara's story, let's reflect on the powerful lessons their journey teaches us. First, true love can't be rushed or forced. It grows naturally through vulnerability, understanding, and shared experiences, often when we least expect it. Second, healing from loss takes time and follows no schedule. Grief isn't something to get over, but rather to integrate into our lives as we move forward. Third, vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. Only by removing our masks and revealing our authentic selves can we build connections that truly fulfill us. Fourth, love isn't a replacement or competition. Our hearts have infinite capacity to honor past relationships while embracing new ones, each unique and valuable in its own way. Finally, true wealth isn't measured in dollars or status, but in the relationships we build and the love we share. Ethan discovered that all his financial success meant nothing compared to the richness of genuine connection with Amara. These lessons remind us that life's greatest treasures often come disguised as our greatest challenges. What strikes me most about Ethan and Amara's story is how it challenges our conventional understanding of both love and wealth. True love isn't the perfect fairy tale we see in movies. It's messy, complicated, and often arrives in unexpected packages. It requires courage to embrace someone fully, knowing their flaws and wounds, and choosing them anyway. And wealth? Ethan had everything money could buy, yet felt empty until he discovered the priceless gift of genuine connection. No amount of success can fill the void that exists when we wall ourselves off from authentic relationships. I believe we all have something of both Ethan and Amara within us, parts that calculate and protect, and parts that yearn to be truly seen and accepted. Their journey reminds me that our most carefully constructed plans often crumble in the face of the heart's wisdom, and that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives are the ones we never planned to write. Claude Sonnet 3.7. Section 9. Conclusion and Life Lessons Part 3. Final CTA. Like, comment, share experiences, and subscribe. 150 words. If this story touched your heart today, please take a moment to hit that like button. It helps our channel reach more people who might need to hear these messages of hope and healing. I'd love to know which part of Ethan and Amara's journey resonated most with you. Have you experienced unexpected love? Struggled with moving forward after loss? Or perhaps you've discovered that true wealth has nothing to do with your bank account. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If you found value in today's story, please consider sharing it with someone who might need these reminders about love's capacity to heal and transform. And if you haven't already joined our storytelling family, now is the perfect time. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss our daily stories of love, fate, and life's unexpected turns. Each subscription encourages me to continue sharing these meaningful narratives that connect us all through our shared human experiences. As we part ways today, I want you to carry this thought with you. no matter what chapter you're currently living, whether it's one of loss, transition, unexpected joy, or quiet waiting. Your story is still unfolding. Like Ethan and Amara, the most beautiful parts of your journey might be the ones you never planned. Tomorrow, I'll return with another story that I've carefully crafted to inspire, comfort, and perhaps challenge you. Our channel's mission is to share narratives that not only entertain, but also illuminate the deeper truths of our human experience. Until we meet again, be gentle with yourself. Remember that vulnerability takes courage, healing takes time, and love, in all its forms, is always worth the risk. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Your presence here means everything, and I'm grateful for the community we're building together. One story, one connection at a time. Until tomorrow, my friends. Before we close, I'd like to offer a final blessing for each of you listening today. May you find the courage to remove the masks you wear and allow yourself to be truly seen. May you discover unexpected love in places you never thought to look. May your grief, when it comes, be honored rather than rushed, and may it eventually transform into gratitude for having loved deeply. I pray that you recognize the true wealth in your life, the connections, the moments of genuine joy, the people who see your authentic self and love you completely. Thank you for allowing these stories into your hearts and homes. Your comments, your shares, your presence here sustains this channel and reminds me why storytelling matters, because it connects us across distances, across differences, across time itself. I'm grateful for each one of you. Until our paths cross again tomorrow, may you be blessed with peace, purpose, and the knowledge that you are never truly alone.